Good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is Melanie Campbell, and I'm the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. And it is my honor to welcome you to the Freedom to Vote Virtual Townhall, which is part of the Black Women Leaders and Allies Voting Rights Week of Action. I want to thank all of our over 41 partners who have joined on this movement action to fight for our voting rights in the United States of America. And as you can see on your screen, these are our collective partners, and we thank all of you for joining in on this week of action to fight for our voting rights. Our community is being targeted with brazen attacks on our voting rights by state legislators as part of a concerted effort to take control over the changing face of this electorate by changing the rules of democracy. Since the November 2020 elections, legislators in 48 states have proposed over 389 voter suppression bills to restrict and curtail people of color, Black folks, Black women, young people, poor folks' ability to vote. This wave of state voter suppression laws is an unveiled attempt to silence the voting power of our people. This is why we need federal voting rights legislation to protect our voting rights now. We need the For the People Act to be passed by the U.S. Senate so it can become the law of the land. So Black women leaders across this nation are joining with our allies, our brothers and sisters, to fight back against the voter suppression movement, anti-voting movement taking hold across this country with a week of action that includes, it started on Monday with a day of social action. Tonight, we will have this conversation with some of the most powerful Black women and women of color, Latino sisters who are really leading the way in so many ways, politically, economically, and through the social justice movement, who will be a part of this discussion tonight. But before we hear from them, let me turn it over to my sister leader, mentor, the Dr. Janetta B. Cole, Chair, President, and CEO of the National Council of Negro Women. Dr. Cole, I turn the floor to you.
Thank you, my dearest sister leader, my sisters, and the righteous brothers who are our allies. You know why we have come together for this Freedom to Vote Virtual Town Hall. But sometimes we have to just say it, say what is obvious. We have to be crystal clear about why we Black folk and folk of other marginalized communities are being literally attacked. Our voting rights are as close to our bodies and souls as anything can be. Attack our right to vote, and you attack us. And so we are here tonight to say enough is enough. Enough voter suppression. We know that voter suppression is an old, a vicious set of practices that are now being paddled as ways to, end quote, guarantee free and fair elections. Really? Do white supremacists really think we cannot tell the difference between what is and what is not? And so, sisters, brothers, siblings all, what is required of us during this period when American democracy is under attack. We need the courage of Harriet Tubman. We need the audacity of Ida B. Wells, the determination of Fannie Lou Hamer, the strategic action of Ella Baker, the wisdom of Mary McLeod Bethune, the strength of Dorothy Irene Hite, the bravery of Shirley Chisholm, the political clarity and vision of Tamika Mallory, the relentless determination of Stacey Abrams, and yes, the political savvy of Melanie Campbell.
Thank you, Dr. Cole, for those powerful and moving words of action, and to remind us who we are, whose we are, and that we're ready for the fight, and we're in the fight. So I want to let folks know out there, if you want to get involved in this week of action, it is not too late. So tomorrow we're having a call to action. And we want to thank Fair Fight Action for taking that part of the action with their hot call summer. And you can go to Black Women Take Action, blackwomentake.action.org, to find out how you can get involved in this week of action, and also the National Urban League, who is also helping to push out the call. We want you to call your U.S. Senator tomorrow. Call your U.S. Senator tomorrow at 202-224-3121 to demand equal access and the freedom to vote. Tell them to protect your right to vote by reforming the filibuster and pass the For the People Act now. Let's break the switchboard of all the folks who are tuned in and those who you know who aren't tuned in. So tomorrow morning, starting at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., we're asking you to join us for this national call-in day to Congress, and call your U.S. Senator. Thank you so much. And now it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to two phenomenal sister friends, sisters, as we call them in the Black Women's Roundtable, who are some dynamic sisters, leaders. And so it's my honor to turn the floor over to Karen Finney, who's a TV commentator and political strategist, and just one of and don't let that smile fool you. She gets it done. She knows how to get it done and bring us together and make the message clear so folks know what we're talking about. Break it down so folks know and not just listen but act. So Karen, it is such an honor to have you, and thank you for taking on this monumental job of moderating this panel, this Freedom to Vote voting rights town hall tonight, along with our sister Star Jones, co-founder of Instant Impact LLC, executive editor of Marquee Who's Who Makers List, and founder of Brown Girls Fundraising Collective, who I can tell you, she does a lot of things, and she surely knows how to raise that money. But she's also a lawyer too, y'all. She's done some really powerful things, and I am so honored to have had the opportunity to not just have seen her on television and go, oh, I would love to meet that sister, and to find out one day I get hanging out with this sister, and also have a sister who knows how to pray and look out for a sister too. So Star, Karen, the floor is yours, ladies.
Wow. Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you so much, Dr. Cole. I'm just going to jump in and say, this is the dream, getting to co-moderate something with Star Jones, who is not only just such a fabulous, fabulous television personality, attorney, so many titles, but sister friend.
Sister friend.
So this
That's
is so
the number
exciting.
one title. That is the number one title. Is the
And
sister.
we're here for an issue that I'm going to turn it over to you in just a second, but an issue that I know is near and dear to both of our hearts, and that is the freedom to vote and making sure that everybody gets to have their say in our democracy. So what an honor to be with you, Star.
Absolutely, Karen. And you know, you and I have had these conversations privately and throughout our sister friendship group, just dealing with and talking about how voter suppression efforts, they may seem ubiquitous, but people don't realize by the end of literally last month, legislators in 43 states had introduced more than 250 voting restriction bills. Okay. That is unbelievable. That's a pace that far exceeds the last year and any other year. And people are asking, okay, well, why? Well, the simple answer, a lot of people say it's anger over the 2020 election results. But if you dig deeper, it is much more beneath the surface. And I think that's what we're going to be discussing today with some of the most amazing sister leaders that we have in our nation. And they really and truly do shape the conversation. And I just thank you so much for being able to co-host with you and work with somebody whose thought leadership is one that I admire. I write down and trust and believe. I write my own notes when Karen Finney is talking. So I'm just so proud to be able to do this with you, and even more proud of the people that we have that are going to be talking today. And so enough introduction. Let me just jump right on in, because in our sisterhood, on any conversation that we're going to have, we like to frame it with a bit of inspiration walking in the door. And who better to provide that inspiration than our sister leader, Susan Taylor. Susan L. Taylor, of course, everyone knows, is the best-selling author of 4 books, the editor of 8 others. I love that she's a 4th-generation entrepreneur who grew up in our home of Harlem, working in her father's clothing store. And we all know at 24, she founded her own cosmetics company, which led to the beauty editor's position at Essence, a publication that she would go on to shape into a world-renowned brand that every single Black woman I know gets their entire started foundationally with Essence. And so now, though, when I tell you this sister leader has just taken it to the next level, she is founder, president, and CEO of National Cares Mentoring Movement. And I am so glad that she is going to start us out this evening with a bit of inspiration. Susan?
Thank you. Oh, boy. Do you hear what I hear? By that sound as well? But let me just say,
It's telling me I'm muted. Sorry about that. Wow, technical difficulties in the age of technology. We're going to work on getting the sound worked out so we can hear that wonderful message of inspiration from Susan Taylor. I know Star Jones is going to join me back in here in just a second. And we're going to get moving with our program and introduce our first panel. So let's see. There she is. There's Star.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to, with your permission, Kara, just frame a little bit
Sure.
about the issues that we're dealing with right now. Just a little bit of history. You know, the lawyer in me can't resist. You know, the struggle for the right to vote is a really central theme in United States history. We take us back to the 1965 Voting Rights Act that, of course, sought to make universal suffrage a reality. And it is arguably the most important United States civil rights law of the 20th century. And I just want to give you this one little statistic before we start with our panel today. In 1964, only 6.7% of Black adult citizens in Mississippi could vote. 6.7%. So when I was preparing for this evening, I looked at that number and I thought they'd like to take us back to 1964. But with this group of women that we have put together tonight, we're going to talk about the action that's going to be necessary to move us forward. And so, Karen, why don't you introduce the stellar panel that will start us out?
It is my honor. And you know, Black women were among the last to get the right to vote. But we have always been on the front lines of fighting for our voice, for the voices of our people, to make sure we have a voice in government. So let me introduce our panel. Donna Brazil, dear sister friend, political strategist, adjunct professor, and author, and television political commentator is going to be joining us. We also have Donna Frisbee Greenwood, from the Philadelphia Black Women's Roundtable. Mignon Moore, who is a co-convener of Power Rising and also a principal with the Dewey Square Group. And last but most certainly not least, Dr. Kimberly Jeffords Leonard. She is the national president of Links Incorporated. And there they are, our beautiful panel coming in. It's wonderful, wonderful to see you all. Star, take it away.
So nice to see you ladies as you are all being placed into the studio. We are working with our technology to make sure that we all do this the right way. But I'm just going to start off with just an open question. We watched the President of the United States today give a speech, a powerful message on the issue of voting rights. So why don't we start with something as simple as, what did you take away from President Biden's speech on voting rights? And I will just start with our sister leader, Mignon Moore.
Mignon, I think you're muted. There we go.
Thank you, Star, for starting with me. It's so good to see you and Karen. You know, when I listened to the president's speech today, it actually took me back to 1965, which you mentioned earlier, Star, to Lyndon Johnson's speech. And I want to read just a quick passage from his speech, because on March 15th, 1965, he gave a very powerful speech in the House. And it stated, in just a small passage, our fathers believed that if this noble view of the rights of man was to flourish, it must be rooted in democracy. The most basic right of all rights was to choose our own leaders. The history of this country, in large measure, is the history of the expansion of that right for our people. Many of the issues of the civil rights are very complex and most difficult, but about this, there can be no argument. Every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. There is no reason which can excuse the denial of that right. There is no duty which weighs more heavily on us than that duty we have to ensure that right. That was in 1965. August 6th, we will be celebrating yet another anniversary. And the reason why I go back to his speech, because at that time, Lyndon Johnson was also fighting the war on poverty. He was also fighting Medicare. He was also fighting Medicaid. He was fighting education. We cannot disjoint our right to vote from the issues that are going to impact us in this Congress. So, what did I take away? My takeaway is that the president still must fight. We must continue to fight. We must not be complacent about this, and we must look at every law. Lyndon Johnson was born in Stonewall, Texas. It's quite an irony that the first suppression kicked off in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say it's an irony, it's as if people have been laying in the cut waiting for the opportunity
Right.
to suppress the vote. Dr. Kim, Dr. Kimberly Jeffries Leonard, I love hearing your thoughts on this issue, because I know this is something that the Links have made a priority and a front burner issue. Will you please tell us, similar to Mignon, what you took away from the president's speech today and what we should get out of it?
I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, my sisters, and Mignon hit the nail on the head, especially when she said that when she took the narrative from President Johnson's speech from 1964. So here we are in 2021, and we're still dealing with the same issues, and it's actually worse than it was before, because now we have these states taking us further and further back. And so it's interesting that Texas was the first state to suppress. We have our Democrats, and certainly we don't want to be partisan, but having to literally leave the state to try to ensure that we don't continue to go back. And so what I took from his speech is that we have a long way to go, and I'm so appreciative of the fact that this administration is going to take this on. We certainly, as a people, must take this on, because we fought too hard to get here. We don't want to lose these rights that are basic rights of everyone, as you heard from Sister Mignon's speech. And we just have to keep keeping this in the forefront. As our president said today, we can't be complacent. The administration can't be complacent. No one can be complacent, because it's too easy to lose these hard-fought rights. So I appreciate the fact that this is the front burner issue today. As you said, the Links have been on this for many years, not even beyond this administration that I lead. But we know that we can't get tired. We have to keep fighting and moving, and we have to keep putting this, ensuring that our leadership understands that these are rights that we expect to have, and we shouldn't have to fight to get them.
You are so right about that, Dr. Kimberly. So let me switch gears a little bit to tactics, because you all know I love my talk about tactics, about how we're going to move this agenda and get this done. So one of the other things that President Biden talked about in his speech today, he talked about using every tool at his disposal to combat the onslaught of voter suppression laws in the states. Star talked a little bit about kind of the numbers, and Melanie talked about what we're looking at and how these laws are passing at such a fast clip. We've got the legislators from Texas, speaking of Texas, here with us in DC, trying to hold the line. So some of the tools that the president talked about was a lawsuit, the Department of Justice lawsuit against voter suppression laws in some of the states. I would call them anti-voter laws. And also a voter education initiative that we know the Vice President Harris talked about last week. So again, Mignon, I'm going to start with you, and then Dr. Kimberly, come to you. I guess my question is, how effective are these tactics, the lawsuits, the voter education initiative, rolling out in the states and local districts, and what else are we seeing happening on the ground? Dr. Kimberly talked about the work that the Links are doing. How effective is what the president talked about? What else needs to be done?
one of the things I want to go back to President Biden for 1 second, because I think both he and Vice President Harris, what they have done effectively is they have raised the alarm bell, and they have used their bully pulpits very effectively in letting us know that we have trouble afoot in all of these states that this legislation is moving through. And I think that what Texas is showing us is there are also tactics that the legislatures can use. There are also tactics that we can use. But the first call of duty is for the president, which he has done, is to say we have a problem and we are going to use, if he uses every tool at the federal government's disposal, then we are light years ahead. If the Justice Department uses their tools, we're light years ahead. And so that's one thing we have to keep our eyes on. That's like, we got to keep the pressure on the federal government, making sure that they don't let us down, because the danger that we have is that the American people, in particular, Black and brown people, believe they voted in unprecedented numbers. They believe that they did everything we asked them to do and more. And so we have an obligation. Elected officials have an obligation. They have to lead for them right now, because they're saying, people are saying, okay, we voted. Now what? I mean, now you want us to protect the vote, but that's why we hired you. So I think that yes, we have an obligation, and I think folks will still go out and vote. But I also think, like Texas, I'm asking everybody to look at the courage of Texas and follow their lead, to block, tackle, play chess, play checkers, whatever you have to do in these states, and let the people be your win. But don't sit up in these legislators. And I think that at some point, the president and the vice president will have to go even further in their tactics too.
Dr. Kimberly, would love to hear from you on this one in terms of some of the things that the president talked about today. And I think, as Mignon said, that power of the bully pulpit, which we know is so important, the power of the lawsuits, the convening power, which I think Vice President Harris is really doing so beautifully. And that is so important. I don't want us to lose sight of that. But from your perspective, what were your thoughts about those tactics, and what else should we be looking at?
You know, it's hard to follow my sister Mignon, because she always says it all.
Well,
so we don't need to come out there. But I really am really proud of the president. I'm proud of our sister Vice President Kamala Harris. And I am proud of those. We're proud of those who have the courage, like our legislators in Texas, to be able to look beyond just what's there and use these tools and tactics to try, as you said, to toe the line. And so I agree with Mignon. We got out in record numbers. We made a statement in this election. I mean, we made a statement. And not only did we make a statement in this election, we made a statement in the special elections after the presidential election. And so, as Mignon said, we have done what we've asked people to do. And so now we do need our legislators to step up. We do need the people that we have put in office to understand that we need them now more than ever, because we have, I don't want to say we have limited power, but it's almost as if the ball is in their court for certain things. I think the lawsuits and these tools are very helpful, because they keep this in front of everybody. They keep people understanding that this is not going away. We can't get complacent. And so the more we educate, the more we see tactics and tools, as we're seeing in Texas, who are now, as Star said, are in DC, then it keeps us understanding the severity of the issue. And as long as we understand the severity of an issue and what we will lose, then we continue to be on point with what we need to do. So I think it's very circular. It's very cyclic. We have to continue. We have to have our legislators continue. We have to continue. We all have to stay on top of educating, getting to the polls, using the policies that are in place, putting appropriate policies in place, looking at some of these things that are passed. And again, and there are lots of special elections happening all over the place. Look at who you're putting in office, because those are who are moving what what is being moved. I mean, at every level, we can't say it enough. At every level, watch who you are putting in office.
Absolutely. And Kim and Mignon, as you were putting some tactics in place for some very tangible things that we need to be diligent about, I'm reminded that when it was the Supreme Court that voted, 5-4 in the Shelby County versus Holder decision that actually jump-started what people have been already planning for many years.
That's right.
That's where we have to become more diligent, is looking way ahead, because trust and believe those who are trying to suppress our vote are always looking way ahead. So again, to give us a little bit more historical perspective, between 1982 and 2006, the U.S. Justice Department had to step in more than 700 times to block changes. It was that was after Shelby that you no longer get to block those changes. So you see, we're being strategic. We have to do the exact same thing. And so it's
the long game. It's the long
game.
100%.
Yes, absolutely. That's
and I want to go back to, and I know we have to wrap because we have a really prestigious panel coming behind us, but I just want to make sure we stay focused on the fact that all of this stuff ties together. And the Republicans are very smart. This is not a Democrat nor a Republican panel, but they're very smart when it comes to the rules. And it did start, with Shelby, with pre-clearance. But we also now are looking at the critical race theory. All of these things tie in together, and it all spells race and denial to me. So just keep our eyes on the prize. I know it's hard. I know it's tough because we're always asking our voters to do stuff. And we have, and again, I say we have an obligation to give back to them when we elect them. But we can't let this go because we got two good people in that White House and we want to keep them there.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both Kim and to Mignon just for helping us to frame where we're going over the course of the next hour or so. And thank you so much just for your insight and your expertise. And as you said, we've got a lot of sisters that are going to be able to join us today. And so we're so happy that you all were able to join us. So thank you very, very much. Karen, I am told that we have the audio fixed for our sister leader, Susan Taylor. And so I would love to bring her back in what would have normally been a bit of a break to get to the next panel. Let's break with some inspiration. So I'll ask Susan to join us again.
Well, I hope it works this time because I'm
already. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so beautiful. I love all four of you, and I'm inspired. I'm inspired, though there's a lot of trouble in the world. And I was talking about Haiti, and Haiti is on all of our minds. And when we think about Haiti, we have a shining example of what we can do in unity. When we think about the Haitian Revolution, we think about Dessalines, we think about Toussaint Louverture, but we never call the names of the women. We don't even know the names of the women. And it was women warriors who sparked the revolution. We're the spark for everything good that happens in our community. But when people redact, when they write the history, somehow, our efforts are minimized. That's the history. It's not going to be the future because our tongues, our mouths are unsealed, our lips are unsealed. And when we look at our history, this is not the hardest or the harshest of times. That's what we have to keep in mind. It's been harder. It's been this we can do. That's what I have to say every day. This we can do. When we think about Dessalines, who helped to defeat three European armies, Napoleon's army, the fiercest army, the French army, the fiercest one on the planet. When we think about defeating Spain, defeating Britain, we're talking about enslaved Africans who didn't have all the tools that the Europeans had, but what they had, and it's the word that I heard repeated again and again by the sisters who spoke before me, Sister Kim and Sister Mignon, tactics. What are the tactics we are going to employ? You know, I want to call her name. I want to call the name of Tanti. That's what we say in the Caribbean. Tanya. When Dessalines died, his mother gave the baby, or the family gave the baby to Tanti Tanya. She taught him how to fight. She taught him hand-to-hand combat. She taught him how to read the wind. She taught him that we have to put our differences aside for the larger win, the win for the people. And when we think about 13 years of fighting, and we think about what the women did behind the scenes, there's a woman whose name is never called. And she was a spirit woman. And one night she said to Bookman, it's time for the revolution. She sparked the revolution. She sparked the revolution. Her name, Gran Guiton. Gran Guiton. And the revolution was on. So I'm saying to myself, and I'm saying to all of us who are gathered, our beloved brothers as well, sisters and brothers, this is not the rough side of the mountain. Yeah, we have difficult days ahead. It's a difficult time, but it's not the rough side of the mountain. What I'm hoping and praying for is a big tent strategy, and that each of us under that tent, every organization has its marching orders. Who's keeping their eyes on the corporate leaders, Ken Chenault and that group that stepped forward early and said, oh no, you're not going to diminish our vote? And we saw what happened in Atlanta. The corporation said, oh no, we're standing with you. We haven't heard from them again. We have to keep connected and pushing in that arena. The Supreme Court, I remember going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and it was a very wonderful, brilliant woman standing next to me, and I whispered to her, suppose we were more engaged with the Supreme Court, writing, calling, not suggesting, but demanding. Do you think that they would have given our power away in a way that they have? And she whispered back to me, absolutely not. So we have to know where to raise our voices. We have to know we know what we're aiming at, but what we have to have is a strategy that gives each organization working together in unity, tactics that take us to where we need to be. You know, we have the Holy Spirit on our side. We are spirit women. The women of Haiti are spirit women. And we know that we don't only do the work. We are the eyes, the hands, the heart of the Holy Spirit, the feet of the Holy Spirit. Self-care, we always have to say that self-care is essential. But life, the ancestors, God, by whatever name we call the divinity, God, Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, the spirit of righteousness is on our side. Tactics, strategy, keeping our hands on that wheel and working in unity. That's what we must do today, like we haven't since 1954, the Montgomery bus boycott. It's time for that kind of unity and strategy once again, and we are going to implement both.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm glad that we got those technical issues resolved, because tactics and strategy was something that we needed to hear today. And if we can just keep those buzzwords in our head, then we know exactly where our focus should be. Thank you for providing us the inspiration that just continues to not just jumpstart this conversation, but move it to the next level. Sister, we appreciate you. We love you. As I sent a little note over to one of our girls, I said, Susan is not playing with y'all. This is far too important. So thank you. Thank you again, Susan. And I am going to now move for the second part of our segment and toss it over to my co-host, to Karen Finney. Karen is going to bring on our next group of sister leaders that are going to take this conversation to another level. So Karen, here you go.
All right, here we go. Well, thank you so much, Star. So joining us now, Sonia Jarvis Esquire, who is legal counsel for the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, also distinguished lecturer and director at the Center on Equality, Pluralism, and Policy, well, this is a tongue twister, Baruch College School of Public Affairs at CUNY. Sonia, so wonderful to have you. and also another dear sister friend and leader in the struggle, Maria Teresa Kumar, who is president and CEO of Voto Latino.
Hello, ladies.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much for joining us. And Maria Teresa, I'm going to start with you. Thank you both for joining us. You were at the speech today, President Biden's speech. And I'm just wondering, we talk about tactics. We've talked about the fact that these laws disproportionately are impacting Black and brown voters, as you know so well, because this has been your life's work. And we saw an increase, as we talked about, the largest turnout in voting in the history of our country, particularly among Black and brown voters. These laws that they're talking about, these laws being passed at the state, I want to talk a little bit about the timing here, because I think it's so important that people understand why this call to action right now is so critical. What's at stake when we've got this activity happening in the states with laws passing at a breakneck pace, as well as Congress, which seem to be stalled right now on the For the People Act? Help folks understand why we need Congress. The president has spoken, but why do we need Congress to take action?
Well, Karen, first of all, I want to thank so much Melly Campbell for having the foresight of having this conversation and bringing all the sisters together. Thank you so much, Karen, for having you here. Let's be clear. We as voters, as organizers, as mothers, as family, we did our work. We registered, we voted our hearts out. We sent members of Congress, the Senate, and the White House. Now it's up to the Senate to do their job. They came in there with an American mandate where the majority of Americans, not a couple million, but close to 20 more million Americans said, this is my Congress, my Senate, my White House. And we as organizers need to make sure that we're holding people fast to our vote. I'll give you an example of what's happening right now in Texas. Texas, according to Northern Illinois University, has the hardest to vote state. Georgia is number 2. What they're trying to do, though, is even though both Georgia and Texas had a fair, safe election that they certified, they see the future in the rearview mirror. As an example, in Texas, they're going to have roughly about 250,000 more Latino youth turn 18 by the next midterm election. And that's not including African-American youth, and that's not including Asian American youth. We're talking about close to 700,000 new young people coming into the voting rolls, eligible to vote, and they don't want us there. We should be so offended because our democracy is strong, because we participate, because we do the grueling work, we stand in line, we are very clear that we are part of this country, even sometimes when this country doesn't want us there. What I heard today from the president was asking us for that mandate. I know we're tired, we're spent. Donald Trump was grueling on so many levels. But what we have right now is a temporary reprieve to make sure that there is a consistent noise in Washington that is talking about our values. And that's why we need to make sure that we are encouraging our senators to make good trouble and to find their courage, to make sure that they vote the right way. And I am right there with Congressman Clyburn. Make an exception, carve out a filibuster reprieve so that we can do the people's business.
Thank you. Wow, Maria Teresa, you always put it right into focus, and I love that so much. Sonia, from your perspective, can you talk about why is this moment so critical when we've got this duality of a breakneck pace in the states and action stalled in Congress that we have got to get moving again?
Well, thank you, Karen and Maria Teresa, for setting our panel in the right direction of focusing on why this has happened, because if we don't understand that, it's hard for us to respond to it appropriately. So we can look at a number of different factors in explaining first, why is it that when we had the most secure election in our history, that we had allegations of voter fraud that were never proven in over 60 lawsuits, before the election. And as a reaction to that turnout by so many that wanted to see a different path forward, despite that, we are now seeing the election process being subjected to nearly 400 different pieces of legislation around the country. And to the point that Texas has one of the most difficult voting systems. They now want to make it even more difficult. And that's why the Texas delegation that left, they're still trying to block that effort of even greater restrictions on the right to vote. I applaud President Biden's speech today, but I didn't hear during his speech what about the filibuster? Because unless we address that issue, we can't bring the HR 1 or HR 4 to the floor of the Senate. And that's why we are stuck on that point that Karen was making about we seem to be stalled. I don't think we have to continue to be stalled, because we saw last summer and the months that followed that public policies can be changed, even ones involving voting, if people are willing to get out and protest. But we can't just rely on those who are able and in a position to protest. We have to ask what our legislators can do now, especially on the Senate side, and especially with respect to getting past the bar that the filibuster has represented with respect to voting rights for African Americans and other people of color. But I want to make sure that we also think about what else can happen. I'm particularly disturbed by the Supreme Court's decision 2 weeks ago to allow the Arizona laws that put restrictions at the last minute that were, in my opinion, and the lower court's opinion, intended to depress the minority vote in Arizona. We saw in 2013 how the Supreme Court went out of its way to put restrictions on sections 4 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act with respect to preclearance. We still had section 2, and this latest case went after section 2. And basically, from a Supreme Court standpoint, they went back to 1980, the type of analysis that was in the city of Mobile versus Bolden case, which basically said, if a city council had made changes to make it harder for Black voters to vote, that's not our fault. You have to show intentional discrimination. And 2 years later, the U.S. Senate added and strengthened Section 2 to the Voting Rights Act to make sure that city of Mobile versus Bolden was no longer the law concerning that issue. Well, now we're back to it, where the court 6-3, just like in city of Mobile versus Bolden, 6-3, has effectively neutered Section 2. So we have a Voting Rights Act that took nearly 100 years for this nation to pass, that now has been eviscerated by 2 opinions of the Roberts Court at the Supreme Court. We have to keep that in mind as why we have to have federal legislation to undo the damage by those 2 recent Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I love that Sonia, you just put in perspective where we are in terms of the courts and that attack. We thank you so very much for that, because that puts our mind right there on one branch of our government. I'm going to bring in Janice Mathis, Esquire, Executive Director of the National Council on Negro Women, because I want to start this next question on about another branch of the government, which is the legislatures. Okay. And it was almost 1 year ago, next month, when NCNW actually wrote that wonderful piece, "When they go low, we go vote." And I actually saved that in my records because I wanted to remember that when they go low, we go vote, because the browning of America is scaring the bejeebies out of these folk. And as Maria Teresa pointed it out, it's coming and it's nothing that you can do about it because people are going to be born. So Janice, I'm coming to you. The Republican-led state legislatures across this country are pushing out voter suppression laws in unified opposition to the Democrats. Let's try to talk a little bit about what this impact will this truly partisan offensive on voting rights have on Black voters and other voters of color in upcoming elections. Since when they go low, we go vote.
Thank you so much. And I am so honored to be part of this discussion tonight with these luminary panelists, and so grateful to you and to Melanie for the opportunity. Yes, when they go low, we go vote. But I cannot help but be a little bit angry because we could be working on other issues. I have essentially been working on voting rights my entire adult life, and I've been an adult for a long time. Ralph Reed came to Georgia in the 1990s to pioneer voter ID, to make Georgia one of the most difficult states to vote in. You know why? Because the Democratic Party was becoming majority Black at that time. We lost our last white male Democrats from the congressional delegation at about the same time. In 1982, in Athens, Georgia, where I was a law student, the only time you could register to vote was from 9 to noon and from 1 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. There was no weekend voter registration, and the election clerk told us, well, the Voting Rights Act, Section 5, prevents us from doing anything because we have to get pre-clearance. That is the kind of resistance that we are likely to face. But I think the most important legislative setback, Joteka, that we would suffer, what were we doing 6 months ago? We were talking about the census. And what happens after the census is redistricting and reapportionment. Can you imagine what these legislators will do in these right-wing states if they are allowed unfettered access to redistricting and reapportionment? It could be, you talking about the president said we're sliding toward autocracy. We may be sliding toward oligarchy. One of the very significant provisions of the For the People Act is it would end partisan gerrymandering. That is an important, and we don't talk about it a whole lot, but that is a very important legislative safeguard that we would give up. We would likely lose poll workers, and federal electors in the 2024 presidential election might not have the final say. They might adopt legislation, and some of them are doing that now, to say that it doesn't matter what the electors say. If we don't like the result they come up with, we'll just replace them. And dark money in politics would replace voter choice. I'm not trying to frighten us, because I know that, like Dr. Haidt said, Black women don't always do what they want to do. They do what they have to do. And this is something we have to do, is push back against this. But you're looking at 6 to 7 states that are going to lose a member of Congress. The losers are likely to be California, New York, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The winners are likely to be Florida, Colorado, Montana, North Carolina, Oregon, and Texas. Do you really want to lose control of the voting process and the legislative process with something that happens only once every 10 years, which is redistricting and reapportionment? And I want to say, too, if there are any of our non-Black allies listening to us tonight, if you are for climate change, this is your issue. If you are for a woman's right to choose, this is your issue. Yes, Black women, we're going to put it on our backs and carry it over the finish line. But if you want infrastructure, if you think that childcare is, and don't think this will be limited to voting rights, because the elected officials who come out of this environment won't care anything about climate change either. They won't care anything about a woman's right to choose either. It's time for all progressives of every color to join together and fight back against this tide of regression and backward-looking thinking.
Wow. Well said. Well said, Janice. Thank you so much. And such an important point because, as you say, it's not just about our right to vote, is also our say in the decisions that affect our lives. So if you care about childcare, if you care about climate change, if you care about the minimum wage, being able to vote and have a say in our government and in the decisions that get made, the people who get elected is critical. And Maria Teresa, as you said, seems like they don't want to hear from us, but we're going to keep showing up. We're going to keep making sure they do hear from us. So, final question to the panel, and I'll start with you, Maria Teresa, and then we'll just go around to everybody. I want to really underscore for people, Sonia talked about what's been happening as we've seen some of these federal protections eroded. We've talked about what's happening in the states. But I want folks to understand and think about what's the way forward. If we lose these federal protections, if we can't get For the People Act passed, if we can't get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed, what's the way forward? I know that's a daunting question, but we're here to help sound the alarm. So my sister Maria, I'm coming to you.
First of all, I think that there is no plan B. I was having this conversation with someone and they said, well, and this person who's a lovely man, he's like, well, I don't know if I were to pull the cord, where would I go? And I said very affectionately, I said, and you're white. Where would we go?
Right.
This is the most amazing country with all its warts because we're living every day and breathing out our possibility. And the moment they disenfranchise the voter, we are no longer a democracy. We are no longer America. We are no longer that beacon of hope that other people see as our possibility. And so our job is to make sure that we are calling our members of Congress, that we are making good trouble. I would encourage us to make sure that we are pounding those walls on those phones and the pavement, because that is when our legislators find courage. They find courage when we call them, when we bother them, we show up. And showing up with our physicality of our bodies, with our phone calls, with making them know that we are paying attention. Because most of what happens is in the darkness when they believe that we're not. Yesterday, someone posed this question saying, well, does it make a difference that the Texas Democratic legislator flew into Washington, D.C.? I said, absolutely, because they are shedding light on a government that wants darkness. And now we're talking about it. And we're connecting the dots that's happening in every single state. And we should be angry because we are sacrificing for this country. It is the women of color, African-American women who have been the frontline essential workers. We put our families and this nation through a pandemic and we voted. And we're very clear of what our priorities were. And now they want to take that away from us? No way, man. Our job is to be on the front lines, to organize and to give strength to every single person. Because as the speaker before I said, the journey is long, but the strength is with our sisterhood. And what they're concerned with is that they know that we will not rest because the stakes are way too high. So thank you, Karen, for this conversation. Star Jones, thank you so much for this conversation. And for my sisters who are in the law, we will be right next to you. Voto Latino is suing Texas. We're going to sue them again until they get it right. But we are grateful for each and one of you because it is together that we know that our future is not only strong, but that's what scares them. Let's make sure that they're scared with power.
Yes, indeed. Maria Teresa, you better preach it. Go on, girl. Go on, girl. Woo. Sonia, bring it home. Talk to us. And then Janice, I'm going to have you close us out.
Wow. Okay.
What happens if we lose these federal protections, sister?
Well, again, we've been there before, but it takes a long time to get back to where you were. So at the very least, we have to mobilize, and mobilize to say our democracy is at risk and we can fix this now, or we can go back another 40 years. I mean, I think it comes down to that.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a coordinated effort to suppress the vote, but the most recent iteration of that tactic started with voter ID. Remember, after the 2000 election, all the noise about voter ID. Once again, I'm taking you back to the court. The court in the Ohio case basically said, well, that law isn't so bad. 6-3, Supreme Court, once again. And we've seen the effect. It's not that there's any problem with voter ID. It's simply that we restricted it much more than it was in the past. A state like Texas would say, oh, if you have a fishing license or a gun license, that's sufficient. But if you have a student ID, that's not. And that's what we mean about, and when we say voter suppression, using the law as a way of stopping democracy, not encouraging democracy. And I also remind us that, especially during last summer, during the demonstrations following George Floyd's murder and beyond, a lot of groups around the country called upon corporate America to support those efforts, and they did. But where are they right now? I haven't heard a word from a corporation talking about these laws that are intended to allow voters to be intimidated at the polls. You can't have a bottle of water. I mean, I could go on, but I don't want to bog us down there. I just want to make the point that we need to support what the Texas delegation is doing, because it's going to show some other states what you need to do to block this in your state when those 400 laws come up before you. I'll stop.
That's right. All right, Janice, I'm going to ask you to bring us home. I'm hearing we got to take to the streets. We're going to call Congress back tomorrow. Just a quick reminder, as part of this effort, we're trying to get people to call into Congress, call your senator, make sure they hear from you. We got to take to the streets. We got to maybe put some pressure on our corporate friends who were there with us last summer and others, right? Janice, help us close us out. What do people know to know about the stakes, and what is the way forward if we lose the fight?
We have to buck ourselves up so that we have the confidence and the strength and the stamina to do one more time what we and our ancestors have done throughout history. Suppose Frederick Douglass had given up whispering in Lincoln's ear. Suppose Ida B. Wells had given up. We don't have that option. So we have to, in spite of all, persevere. But the other thing I think we have to do is remember January the 6th.
Yes.
Don't let them whitewash that. Don't let them rewrite. As a kid, I studied Russian history. And one of the tactics of the Russians, they just rewrite you out of history.
That's right.
We're getting close, but this is not Russia yet. And so every time somebody goes into denial about January the 6th, that was a rebellion. That was Fort Sumter 2021 style. I'm from South Carolina. I know how the country can slide into madness. This is 1876 and the Tilden-Hayes Compromise all over again. This is 1968 and Kenneth King is dead and Bobby Kennedy is dead. But we pulled ourselves back from the brink. And that's what I would leave us with. We cannot be divided among us. Progressives, blacks, women, Spanish speaking, Latinx folk. We've got to realize that whatever it is that separates us, the time is now for us to really make that, dare I say, rainbow coalition real in our lives and in our politics. And if you call them once, call them again. I called my senator 3 times today and they're Democrats. But even the Democrats can say to their fellows, you know how many calls I got today about that? I think it's really, the other thing we can do is we know that people like Rodney, there are folk who are whispering. Some of us don't live, I live in an all black neighborhood, but some of y'all live in nice suburbs and you have Republican senators who represent you. Don't call the Democrats. Go see your Republican senator. They represent you. Call them out. Those are just some of the things that we can do, but mostly what we can do is let our light shine and persevere and realize that time and God are on our side.
Thank you so much. Janice, thank you so much. Just keeping it in perspective. Again, I go back to when they go low, we go vote. And NCNW has been leading the way for a very long time. Ladies, thank you. Thank you so much for participating in this portion. MT, Sonia, Janice, thank you. We really do appreciate your help this evening. And Karen and I are thrilled because we get to bring in just some more people. I mean, just the fruit just keeps on coming. Right now, we are so blessed to have our Bishop Leah Daughtry, the founder and co-convener of Power Rising, of course, a principal on These Things LLC. Our sister leader, Joteka Edie, chief organizer of hashtag Win with Black Women. We spent a whole lot of time together. Founder and CEO of Full Circle Strategies. Joycelyn Tate, senior policy advisor, Black Women's Roundtable, NCBCP. And Donna Frisbee Greenwood, Philadelphia Black Women's Roundtable. Donna's in Philadelphia, so we're going to get some perspective from her from being truly on the ground after the speech. But since this is a segment where we talk about the power of Black women, let's just start right out. That history has shown us that Black women have always been the driving force when it comes to galvanizing the community to vote. So what role do you think Black women will play in this new voting rights movement? And now as we look around this group, this is the group to ask that question too. I'll ask you, Joteka, to start us out.
Well, I think when we look at the role that Black women are playing right now, I think it's important for us to look back at the role that Black women have always played. I think when we think and we hear the word voting rights, it's synonymous with, you know, the names Fannie Lou Hamer. It's synonymous with the names of Sojourner Truth. It's synonymous with the name of Shirley Chisholm. And I could continue to call the role Dr. Dorothy Irene Height and others that played a pivotal role, Barbara Jordan and so many others, Hazel Lynn Dukes, that laid the foundation for us to continue to do this work. We look at today, we look at so many Black women really carried democracy over the finish line in 2020 and turned around and did it again in the 2021 special election in Georgia. Black women have continued to be on the forefront, fighting for voting rights and fighting for our democracy. Right now, as we see this aggressive attack on voting rights happening all across the country, you know, I really look at it as an attack on what Black women did. I personally feel like it is an attack on us as Black women because the country and particularly Republicans saw the power of Black women, what we were able to do, the historic numbers and the history that we made with the election of our now Vice President Kamala Harris and what that means for the future. And we're seeing exactly what we saw, you know, nearly, you know, years ago in 2010 and 2011. We saw, you know, a massive attack on voting rights, more than 200 bills put forth across the country meant to cut early voting, to cut same-day registration, all after two things happening. The browning of America, as we heard earlier, we heard Maria Teresa speak of, and then also the historic election of President Barack Obama. We're seeing the exact same thing happen after we saw the historic role that so many Black women, many of which have been on this program tonight, and others that are watching played to take America forward, and now they're trying to take us 3 steps back.
That's the summary right there when it comes to how Black women look. We put it on our shoulders all the time. This is just another time we are putting it back on our shoulders. Bishop Daughtry, when you and Mignon Moore convened Power Rising, did you have any idea that we would still be fighting voting rights throughout this 2021 season? Because this is a movement that Power Rising seems to have literally been born to get to the bottom of, because we are not letting it go. Go ahead, Doctor. I think you're muted, sis.
Good evening, sisters. It's always good to be with you. And, you know, Star, I don't know that we knew we would be in exactly this particular situation, but I think it's helpful to remember, I am the first generation in my family that grew up with the right to vote. And I'm not 60 yet. So we have spent more time as Black people in this country, as Black women in this country, fighting for the right to vote than the amount of time that we've actually had the right to vote. So this idea that we would somehow be sitting on a couch eating, drinking tea and coffee saying, oh, the battles are over, it's all too new and it's all too recent. And so I still got my battle gear on. Well, actually, I had to put my battle gear on around this voting right because I didn't have to fight for the right to vote like my mother did and my grandmother and so on. So I think Black women are prepared and equipped for this battle. We've been fighting. We're going to continue to fight. And we like to say that, Black women, we carry America on our back and we got to listen, we're not really fighting for America. We're fighting for ourselves. Yes. And it just so happens that when we win, America wins. So Power Rising and all the coalitions that we're part of, including the one that's hosting this call tonight with Sister Melanie Campbell, who's part of our convening group, Joteka Edie, we're ready for the fight. We're ready for the battle because we know, as the sisters have said earlier today, that it's not simply about voting rights. It's not simply about the ballot box and voting restrictions. Because if that's all it was, we wouldn't be talking about this. This is about clean air and clean water and good schools and health care and all the rights that we want and need in order to live our version of the American dream. So no, we're not going to stop, can't stop, won't stop, as the song says, until we are able to live fully, freely, all the things that our ancestors dreamed about when they were out picking cotton and tobacco and rice and sugar. And they imagined that we would be ready for the battles, to carry the battle forward for them, because of them, because of they kept on breathing so that we could breathe and fight. So we're ready for the fight. Let's go.
I love it. See, that Bishop just bring the fire. That's just it. That she just brings the fire and lets you know, puts it in perspective. But then again, you've been fighting since you was a child. And
I was going to say,
and we are grateful to God that you were born into that family of fighters. And we thank you for your service, and we thank you for your family service, because they've been doing it a whole heck of a long time, sis. We appreciate you so very much. Somebody wrote to me, you never took off that battle gear, and it was very clear. You never took it off. You never took it off.
I was born with battle fatigues on.
And we believe every minute of it. Karen?
Yes. Whew. I got to cool down from that.
I know.
All right. Let's keep going, though, because this is so important. Let me just restate what Bishop Leah said. We were the last to get the right to vote. Mm-hmm. Let's just say that. For many of us, as Leah said, first generation women able to vote, Black women able to vote, born that way. For me, just a couple years before I was born. Donna and Jocelyn, I want to get you into this conversation because as co-conveners and co-partners in this week of action and in this call to action around protecting our freedom to vote, our right to vote, would you talk about, and I'm going to start with you, Donna Frisbee Greenwood, a bit about what you're doing to help make sure Black women are mobilizing, and our men, we love our men too, don't get me wrong, and our communities mobilizing in this fight.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with everyone. And I have been inspired by all of you. And while all of you are focused nationally, we are focused locally here in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia region. And in Pennsylvania, while not as known as what's happening in Texas and Georgia, the Pennsylvania Senate Bill 735 passed, not only requiring voter ID, but also got included in the Pennsylvania state constitution. So now voter ID is in the Pennsylvania state constitution. Fortunately, Republican legislators in the House tried to pass additional voter restriction, but our Governor Wolf vetoed that bill, House Bill 1300, on June 30th of this year. And so we still have a fight here in Pennsylvania, and we continue to organize not only Black women, but brothers. We have a project we call Sharp Insight, where we train and educate barbers to talk to Black men about the importance of staying politically active, registering them to vote, getting them involved, and getting them to vote. And we continue to talk to and educate Black women in our city through our Black Women's Roundtable and through our partner Clear Channel Radio that we do a number of forums with online and live on the air, educating our constituents in Philadelphia about these restrictive laws and continuing to get people to not only just vote in every election, right? Because every election is important, particularly when you have a legislature that's voting against you in every turn that they can. So not only that we're voting, but also that we're writing and we're calling our state legislators. All politics, as we've heard, is local. And it is so important in Philadelphia that we keep people engaged, because as Philadelphia goes, the state goes, right? As our region goes, we can carry the state if we've got people turning out in this region of the state. And so we can press forward.
You are pressing forward, and I love that. I love that you're taking it literally to the streets and into the barbershops and to the round tables, keeping the message and the work going. Jocelyn Tate, I'm going to come to you next. Can you talk a bit about, in addition to the phenomenal work of Melanie Campbell and Dr. Janetta Beshkal, our co-conveners of this beautiful week call to action, talk a little bit more about, we know Melanie was at the meeting with the president last week at the White House. Talk a little bit about what the Black Women's Roundtable is up to and keeping Black women on the forefront of this fight.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to just share a few words, because I've heard a lot of names mentioned tonight, some phenomenal Black women in history, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells. But I want to tell you a few names in the Black Women's Roundtable that have been on the streets and in the fight for voter rights for a while. I want to share and lift up Helen Butler and Felicia Davis and Deborah Scott, who took it over the finish line in the last presidential election in Georgia. I want to lift up Black Women Roundtable members Sheila Tyson and Letitia Daniels in Alabama, who were on the ground in the fight during this last election and in past elections. The Black Women's Roundtable is there. We're in the streets. We're in Georgia. I want to lift up Salandra Benton. These are names that you might not see in the history book, but these are members of the Black Women's Roundtable that are on the ground fighting the fight. We've never stopped. We keep going, and we'll continue to go. We're going to continue to fight in this fight. So let me tell you, I just want to lift up a few more names, because a lot of these people don't hear of. Petey Talley in Ohio, Black Women's Roundtable in Ohio. Cassandra Welchin in Mississippi. Olita Fitzgerald in Mississippi. Stephanie Moore and Tamika Ramsey in Michigan. These are women of the Black Women's Roundtable that continue to fight, never take off our gear, and we're ready to fight again to keep our voting rights. So I just want to lift up those names, because those names you may not know, they may not be in the history book, but these are some of the women in the Black Women's Roundtable that are fighting, continuing to fight. Don't stop, don't give up. Get tired, but still keep going like we always do. Now, I also want to share with you what we'll be doing as far as the Black Women Take Action events this week. As Melanie mentioned earlier, tomorrow we will have our national call-in day, where we want you to break the switchboard at the Senate offices. Call them. Tell those senators to reform the filibuster and pass the For the People Act. And it doesn't stop there. We have more things to come. After this week, we're not going to stop the fight. We're going to keep going, and we'll keep informed. Stay with Black women leaders, and we'll let you know what's going on. Go to blackwomentake.action.org and follow us, what we'll be doing, because we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop. Just like Janice said earlier, Dorothy Height said, we may get tired, but we always do what we have to do. We may not want to do it, but we have to do it. And we will continue to fight. So I just wanted to lift those names up and tell you, stay with us, stick with us, not just Black women, but our other allies that are with us in this fight. We're here to stay and we're not going anywhere.
Thank you so very much, sister. I mean, Karen, baby, that table set in the beginning of the segment. And here are our marching orders at the end. And that's what I'm talking about, because that is how Black women do it. Ladies, I'd like to say thank you so very much for your participation today. We appreciate your time. We know the work that you're doing and the kinds of opportunities that we had today to have your insight and your thought leadership has just been awesome and fantastic. Right, Karen?
Yo, amen. I'm reinvigorated all over again. So
thank you all again, very much so. And Karen, I am so thrilled to have had this opportunity to spend just getting that thought leadership, that insight from so many of our sisters on not just talking the talk, but walking the walk and putting us into action for the next steps, because those next steps are going to be absolutely critical. And if you remember nothing from this evening, you must remember that For the People Act is a priority. It is our front burner issue. We are coming to the conclusion of our panel program, but we will not end with just a panel conversation. I am thrilled. Karen and I are absolutely thrilled that our sister leader, Dr. Bernice A. King, the CEO of the King Center, has been able to join us. There is our sister. And I love to describe her and introduce her as a global thought leader, orator, and peace advocate, because she not only brings the fire, but she lights the fire under us. And so I am grateful to God that we have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Bernice A. King.
Thank you so much, Star. Karen, I just want to add a log to the fire, because the fire is really burning on tonight. I don't know. I'm sure that many of you have been inspired on tonight and revved up by all of these very powerful women leaders who have really given us our marching orders. But as I was listening, some of what I'm going to say is a reiteration. I tell people all the time, when a preacher comes behind other speakers and or preachers, and you hear some of the same stuff being repeated, it means that's what you're supposed to grab hold to. But I heard the words of Brother James Cleveland tonight as everybody was talking, when he said, "I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told us that the road would be easy, but I don't believe he brought us this far to leave us." And I start with that tonight because I think about my father and mother tonight. I invoke them tonight because the very battle that we are in was the crowning of their very work, fighting for voting rights. But I think about them tonight, especially as my father talked about the moral arc of the universe being long, but it bends towards justice. It was said earlier, God is with us. God and the universe are on the side of justice. We are fighting for justice. We are fighting for righteousness. And God is with us in this struggle. And I just believe in my spirit, although it looks like it's very dark right now. And I hear my mother saying to me, "Baby, the darkest hour is before the dawn." I forgot to ask my mother before she left here, how do you know when we're at the darkest hour? I don't know if we're at the darkest hour, but it's certainly dark right now as it relates to voting rights. And I heard my sister say earlier about there's no plan B, but there is a plan G. And that plan is called God's timing. There's a thing in the universe called Chronos and Kairos. Chronos is what we call the clock time that's ticking away. Every day we are diligently working on the clock. 9 a.m., 8 a.m., 6 a.m., 3 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m. tonight. We're all working towards the protecting the right to vote, seeking to gain some things back and advance some other things. And I want you to know that God is with us. And I believe that if we continue to stay focused on bending that arc towards justice, that the Kairos moment is going to come. God is not going to leave us where we are. How do I know that? Well, I want to take us back to 1956. Actually, before 56. What started us on this pathway in this modern movement towards civil and human rights was the civil rights movement. That was a movement, my sisters and my brothers, that was really started by women. We can't forget that. This all started with a group of women called the Women's Political Council, who were sick and tired of being humiliated and mistreated on the buses in Montgomery, Alabama. Yes, there were things happening already as a prelude to this across the South. But it was this group of women who said, we have to do something. And when another woman by the name of Rosa Parks sat down on that bus, it stirred up a movement that became a watershed moment for the rest of the nation. And there were people who were galvanized, and they were organized, and they were mobilized by the leadership that just so happened to be my father in the presidency. But it was a court case that was filed on behalf of women in concert with what was happening on the ground as a result of women that caused bus desegregation to be reversed. I want to call names, since we were just calling names: Aurelia Browder, Claudette Colvin, Susie McDonald, and Mary Louise Smith. Those are the women who are with us on the night tonight with a cloud of witnesses, along with my mother, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, who said, baby, the darkest hour is before the dawn. She was reminding me that it doesn't matter. It may get difficult. It may get dark. It may get challenging. It may look like our backs against a wall and we have nowhere to go, but the dawn is coming. And in 1956, that's what happened. They were in a courtroom. The city officials had filed an injunction to disrupt, interrupt, stop the carpool, to call it illegal. And that meant that they would no longer have an avenue to continue the bus protest, because people would not be able to get to work because everybody wasn't going to be able to walk. But Lord have mercy. While they were working in the chronos of time, a Kairos moment hit them. A Kairos moment hit them in that courtroom when they thought it was over. When my father had gotten to a place where he felt that this was the darkest moment in that Montgomery movement that started us on this course to fight for freedom and justice and equality. And in that Kairos moment, the decision of the United States Supreme Court intersected with time, and bus segregation was declared unconstitutional. Don't grow weary in well-doing, because we're going to reap if we faint not. We are in a Kairos moment. And as my sister Susan said, tactics, strategy, organizing, unity, intentionality, focus, and connecting arms is what's going to get us there. And I close with the words that I always like to close with. when I'm telling a group of people that what you're doing is going to reach some results. So keep the faith. Words of my granddaddy, Daddy King. Keep looking up and walk together, children. Don't you get weary. Fight nonviolently together, children. Do not get weary. Keep organizing and mobilizing together, children. Don't you get weary. Strategize, synchronize together, children. Don't you get weary. Coordinate and collaborate together, children. Don't you get weary. Speak up, speak out together, children. Don't you get weary. Fuss, fight, but get over it together, children. Don't you get weary. But don't forget to pray together and be loved together, children, so we don't get weary. And one day, we will all be able to say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free from voter suppression, free from injustice, and free from inequity, and free from lies, and free from half-truths. And in the meantime, the movement continues to pass the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act and For the People Act. God bless you.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Bernice King. That was, I don't have words. The
Amen.
words are, amen. And thank you for reminding us where we've been, because that's how we keep faith in where we're trying to get to. And like you said, we're not going to be weary. We're going to get there. So thank you.
Amen.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernice.
Wow.
Karen, this has just been an amazing opportunity to share, to strategize, and to plan, to be very deliberate in what it is that we see as a plan of action. And so I just want to thank all of the people who participated this evening, our sister leaders who brought the fire and lit that fire to all of us. We are going to bring back our sister leaders who convened this evening. But I just would like to remind everyone as we finalize our last moments with you, high voter turnout clearly threatens many who are in power. The vote, despite its limitations, remains literally the most powerful tool we have to effect change. And using the vote to move the needle toward real economic and racial justice has never been more necessary. So the fact that we have to call out voter suppression for the racist and economic control at its core is absolutely imperative. But it's even more important in making sure we stop it in its tracks. And so finally, my last words are the For the People Act, if enacted, would be the most significant voting rights and democracy reform in now more than a century. That has to be our front burner issue. Karen?
You're so right, Star, and what an honor to be with you tonight. And as we witness this incredible collaboration, strategizing, inspiration to keep us refueled in this moment, I always like to remind us we're in this moment because we're winning, because we did, because the American people got out there and voted despite all kinds of odds, because our people stood on lines. That's why it's because we're effective. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't be working so hard to take away our rights to vote. And this really, for me, comes down to freedom. This is about the freedom as enshrined in our Constitution to be contributing members of the American democracy. And our democracy demands that we all get a voice. We all have a say. That's what For the People is about. And we need both. I want to make sure we're all clear. We need For the People Act and we need the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We need both things to stop in its tracks what is happening in the states and to make sure that there are minimum standards at the federal level, long overdue, to make sure we are protecting access to the right to vote, that we are protecting our freedom to vote. So it's just been an honor to be with you. And I'm so honored to bring back two of our leaders in this, our conveners, two women who have the vision to bring us together for this evening, to bring everybody together, more than 40 groups this week, in our call to action. Dr. Janetta B. Cole, who first inspired me when I was about 25 years old. I'll tell that story another time. And and Melanie Campbell, a sister leader who inspires me every day. The floor is back to you, ladies.
Ooh. Dr. Cole, what? Y'all brought the fire. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Star. Thank all of the stars, as we say, with the Black Women's Roundtable who were on this, what I say was more of a rally than a town hall. More one of motivation and one of insight and one of bringing the information and getting it to our people. And when we brought in our sister Bernice, Reverend Dr. Bernice, and I can remember meeting her when we were both students and knowing her mom, and then knowing and just had a lot of flashbacks, if you will, to say for such a time as this, God has brought us together for this fight that we didn't, I won't say I saw it coming. We always know we have backlash, but not the fight. And I shared this with Dr. Cole that I had put up my having to organize protest shoes. I would just show up to the protest. But when the Senate decided that 10 senators specifically, that they didn't have time to talk about voting rights. One of my mentors spoke to me, Reverend James Orange, and asked me, he called me Tim. My name is not Tim. For those who know him, knew him, what you gonna do? He spoke to my spirit and it just said, it's time to go to jail. It's time to get in the streets. Yes, we will be in the rooms of power, but it's our people. We have to have an elevated movement for democracy, for justice, for voting rights, for the future of our community, our nation, and the world, because this democracy is on the brink of collapse. We helped build it, and as Black women, one of our burdens and one of our blessings is that we can also mobilize to help save it one more time. So on that note, Dr. Cole, I want to thank you for being who you are, how you are, and that God brought you in my life many, many decades ago. And here we are again, making good trouble. And so I'm honored to be able to work with you and be around you as much as I have been, and all of our sisters, of course. But life comes in many, many ways, and we're full circle with all of us having to be together for such a time as this. So thank you. Thank the back end staff behind the scenes making it happen. And we're looking forward to tomorrow. Pick up that phone, text yours, do whatever you need to do to communicate with your U.S. senators to pass the For the People Act. And on Thursday, show up on Capitol Hill for those who can for our day of action. We got some surprises for you. Turn over to you, Dr. Cole. Your mic.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go.
Yep.
Sisters, what a night. We were inspired by Susan Taylor. We had a courageous conversation with Darren Finney and Scott Jones. We were informed and motivated by panels that have been in the struggle, have no intention of leaving the struggle, and invited all of us to join in the struggle. And then how did we move toward closure? Dr. Sister Bernice King brought us up and motivated us to hold on while we do the work. Because no matter how dark the night, dawn comes in the morning. Good night, sisters all. The struggle continues.
Good night. Good night. Thank you all. Be ready for the fight.